and welcome to Motorcycle Experience, the podcast. I'm your host, Dave Hatch, along with my co-host, Colin Fraser, and my producer, camera person, editor, longtime cohort, Cameron McFadden is here operating the board. Welcome, everybody. How you doing, guys?
Great. Colin, how you doing?
Very good here in COVID-infested Toronto.
Well, it's, as usual, Cameron and myself are out here in beautiful Prince Edward County on a chilly, frosty first day of February. So it's great to hear your voice, Colin, and hear that you're still doing well.
And I will add that we are fully masked. We're fully partaking in all of the emergency measures. And David and I are sitting at a table. We're fairly far apart, and we're both masked. So
both masked, and we are a hockey stick plus apart.
Exactly.
So we're following the guidelines. And Colin obviously is definitely far enough away from us. Colin, I hear that we were going to have like a light and breezy conversation this morning about favorite rides, and instead I hear you've got a burning issue that you'd like to discuss. What?
Well, that sounds like I need to talk to a doctor, but no, this is just some interesting news. I'm involved with the MCC, which is a group that is involved in unifying motorcyclists and motorcycle racers and just supporting the sport in Canada. And if that sounds like a national federation group such as the CMA, that's a good way to look at the goals of the MCC, that we're looking to be a new direction in Canada. And there was some political news on the international structural front that occurred on Friday that I don't think very many people are aware of. And I wanted to tell you about that and then see what you thought.
Oh, very cool. So first of all, give us the acronyms. The MCC stands for
Motorcycles Confederation of Canada. So that's a group of motorcyclists working on topics that are of the common interest and good for motorcyclists in Canada, or at least that's our purpose. And we've been around for 11 years, and we are affiliated with a number of groups. The most obvious is the MMIC, which is the Motorcycle and Moped Industry Council, which is the management end of things from the manufacturers. I used to be on the board of the Hall of Fame. The MCC were a big supporter of the Hall of Fame. My road race series is affiliated with the MCC, the National Motocross Association, the Flat Track Series. So the MCC are a player in terms of structure, but they're also involved with schools and rider initiatives and political stuff and things to do with both federal and provincial politics to support motorcyclists. So that's if you imagine what the AMA do in the States, then that's kind of the MCC in Canada.
Colin, is this a non-profit organization?
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's structured to be a membership organization, and of course, it would provide different things for different people depending on your interests, whether it's touring or off-road or hardcore sport, like what I was talking about earlier.
Okay, and I'm going to ask all the innocent questions like sanctioning. You mentioned road racing. So are they a sanctioning body with competitive motorcycle sports?
Yeah, so they're an oversight. They don't get involved in the day-to-day. I have a company that does that, as does Jetworks, who run the motocross and supercross and Flat Track Canada. So, but they do get involved in ruling on big issues, like when there's a tribunal decision to be made because competitors are not happy with how events played out at a venue, then it bumps upstairs to an MCC meeting, which is basically the binding arbitration of problem solving for motorsport in motorcycle racing in Canada.
Okay, so they look after motorcycle racing in Canada. So then you mentioned the CMA. Now that's a Canadian Motorcycle Association. They've been around forever and a day in terms of as an organization, but are they still involved in sanctioning road racing and motocross here in Canada?
A little bit at the regional level, not very much, and they are still our international affiliate, so the international body that governs sports. So, for instance, runs all the World Championship events on every discipline of racing is all affiliated with the FIM, which is the Fédération International Motorcyclists kind of thing, although it would be better said in French, and I didn't want to embarrass myself by trying it that way.
Okay, so, all right, the CMA, they've been around for a long time, but as I'm sort of naive about all of this, but I don't think they've really been directly involved in any kind of national competition on the motorcycle front for ever and a day.
No, and I can play a little bit towards your question because, of course, at one point you and I were involved in organizing the races and the television broadcasts, and we started professional motorsports Productions, which is a company I still run. And you and I tried for, I suppose, a bit of a shotgun wedding between the motorcycle manufacturers and the CMA to try and resolve a lot of these perceived and real conflicts. And that event actually occurred more than 2 decades ago when we convened the meeting that you were at Yamaha Motor Canada, just outside of Toronto, with all the major players and some people from the CMA and some people like you and I. And if you recall, that went poorly.
Okay, now it's all starting to come back to me. That's right. Back in 98, Colin and myself, Cam, I don't know how much of this history you know, but Colin and I tried to, and we were successful, but our plan was successful in some ways. Our plan was to create a national motorcycle competition, a national Superbike series, and we discovered that Colin had a lot more background on this than I did because I was sort of responsible for the television side of things. So TSN was ready and willing to take the national Superbike series and put it on the air. But we had to somehow bring the country together. There were sanctioning bodies all across Canada, and we had to bring them all together so that we could have a national series. We called a meeting at Yamaha back in the day, and as Colin mentioned, there were representatives there from all the manufacturers and the CMA. And at some point in the meeting, we had pitched our proposal to bring the country together. And I believe, if I recall right, we were asked to leave our own meeting. We were ejected from our own meeting. And there was Colin and I standing out in the hallway looking at each other going, what's going on? Why are we not in the meeting that we called?
I think that being made to stand in the hallway does definitely focus your point of view, right? It does become a pivotal moment in how you view a challenge.
How were you asked to leave? I mean, surely, David, I've known you for a long time, and I've never seen you raise your voice. How did this come about?
Oh, there was no raising of voices. We were having a civil meeting, but for some reason, we were asked to leave the room for a few minutes so that there could be some frank discussion that Colin and I were not privy to be a part of. Right, Colin?
Yeah, I think the issue was that the CMA felt that we were interlopers, that we were maybe a little big for our britches, that we thought we could broker this deal, and they didn't think we should be in a discussion at that level. And the irony of it was that initially we worked with Alan Labrosse's Quebec group, the ASM, to sanction once this whole thing didn't play out the way we wanted to, and that group had been affiliated with the CMA and split away with the new group. So in the end, there was structure there, and eventually Dave and I handled both the sporting and the media side of things, all of it. But it seemed at the time it would make sense to use this as an opportunity to try and heal some old wounds and make things simpler and more efficient, and maybe suit the racers, particularly the top guys, a little bit better and make their lives simpler and a little less expensive. But that definitely didn't play out that day at Yamaha, but it was a bit of a watershed in terms of how the national series developed.
And did someone just come back from the meeting and bring you back in and say, okay, Dave, okay, Colin, we're ready for you?
Yes.
No, the meeting, well, I wouldn't say that, Dave. The meeting was basically over by the time, we were invited back into part of the meeting.
Yeah, but the meeting that was really most important to us was over. And just to wrap that part of this story up, Colin and I literally drove across Canada that year and pulled together a national Superbike series starting in the east, down in Shubenacadie, Nova Scotia, with a great bunch of people at Atlantic Motorsport Park. So we had one sanctioning body there. We were dealing with Quebec and holding races at Saint Eustache and Alma and all kinds of things there in Quebec and tracks there, and different sanctioning body again. Then we were out in Calgary, another sanctioning body, and then finally, I believe those were the days of racing on the airstrip in Abbotsford, and again another sanctioning body. And so it because the CMA was not directly involved with us and not being very helpful, I'm trying to be very careful here. It made it for a lot more work for Colin and I, and it made it very tough in the early days. But we pulled it off, and here's Colin 20-something years later still running a national Superbike series. And as I said, I haven't really come across, as the host of Motorcycle Experience, I don't think I've come across the CMA maybe I could count on one hand where I've gone to something over the last 31 years. Maybe 5 times I've come across something that's been sanctioned by the CMA. So what's going on, Colin?
So the MCC put together a proposal to request that we become recognized as the national administration body for motorcycling, both on and off road and street, if you will, as licensed motorcyclists on the road. And it became a 2-part issue at the FIM Congress, which, as you can imagine, was much delayed because of COVID and was held remotely, with everybody calling in. So the first question was, would the FIM determine that the CMA would no longer represent Canada? And then the second question was, would they then affiliate with the MCC? And as it turned out, didn't get to the second question because they had a vote on the first question, which was the removal of the CMA as a national federation because they hadn't lived up to a bunch of requests and guidelines and expectations, I suppose. And it's a voting situation. And I think we had to, I shouldn't say I think, I'm looking at the notes right now. We needed a 2/3 vote. And I say to remove the CMA required a 2/3 vote of the administration portion of the FIM, which is obviously each vote represents a country. And 43 countries voted to expel the CMA. 19 were against removing the CMA. And most intriguingly, 11 countries completely abstained. And that's a very high number of abstainers from an FIM vote of any kind. So we were short 6 votes from being able to have the CMA removed, which means that it never got to an argument, discussion about the MCC, which I'm comfortable we had a very good chance. We made a good proposal about what we could provide. So the next FIM Congress will be probably 10 or 11 months from now, because hopefully post-COVID it would be a more regular event at a normal time and maybe even allow for participants. But basically, my interpretation is enough favors were called in by the CMA that they managed to keep their position, although the fact that people abstained rather than voted to keep the CMA in is maybe a slight positive, but I would say a lot of people on the board of the MCC, and of course, until really this discussion we're having right now, very few people outside the MCC know anything about this. Most of us were optimistic that we'd accomplish this goal, although I've been involved in one way or the other with disputes with the CMA for over 40 years, so I'd certainly never underestimate their ability to play the card that disaster is going to ensue if you do anything new or change anything or throw in with a bunch of upstarts. Although, honestly, speaking specifically on my behalf, but on behalf of a lot of other people on the board, we're certainly not upstarts.
So, Colin, forgive me. You said it needed a 2/3 majority to get through. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
I guess they count the abstentions as part of the 2/3?
Yes.
Okay.
That's basically why I focused on that. And I've had a couple of days to think about this. This happened 3 days ago. So, it's the kind of thing that you have to be a member involved to be able to watch the voting. But it was to some degree an open concept, although it wouldn't be open to the degree it was when there's a normal annual general meeting because of the realities of the coronavirus.
So what are the consequences? Is it just business as usual then?
Well, that's an interesting way to ask the question, because if the CMA remains as the national federation, what exactly is business as usual, and what functions do they serve, what services do they provide, and what's going on there? And again, I don't want to speculate on that, but I don't think, obviously, because I'm involved with the MCC, that's our best direction. I think we maybe failed because our forward-looking presentation maybe didn't specifically deal with how things are exactly in Canada right now, where we are in some ways splintered, and the biggest racing organizations are separated from the FIM, which obviously is not a good situation. So yeah, it's status quo, but the status quo, in my opinion, hasn't been very good for a very long time. And a lot of people behind the scenes have been chipping away at this, and I think we got closer than we ever have, but I think everybody would like to do better than that. And we're fairly optimistic going into this vote that this would be the watershed moment. And as it turned out, that moment has yet to occur.
Wow. That's just so disappointing to hear, Colin, and I'm very saddened to hear this. I'm sorry it didn't go the way you had hoped it would go on Friday with the FIM, but My goodness, I was shocked to see the memo this morning come across the computer here with your suggestion that this was a topic to discuss, because I thought, this was something we were dealing with back in 1998, and there was a history there that went back, another decade and a half, and I just cannot believe that this is still ongoing. I can't believe it hasn't been resolved. And it's kind of sad, really, because, someone who has been controlling the CMA for all these years is still there and still controlling the situation. And they just seem to have such a lockdown on not only the relationship as the CMA here in Canada, but the lockdown with the relationship with the FIM.
And just to further that, I just want to sort of hear the CMA side of things. Did they have anything to say on their behalf from this vote?
In my opinion, no. There's an opportunity to say, here's what we're going to change, here's what we're going to do better, here's how we'd like to remedy the issues that led to this discussion that we're not capable of administrating, and another group has already taken over a lot of those responsibilities. But unfortunately, in my opinion, it was more of a doom and gloom presentation, that these guys are upstarts, that they're troublemakers, that there's some factions in the FIM who are out to do harm. And, loyalty to people is not how governance is supposed to work. It's supposed to be about, working to the center, compromises that make things better for everybody, and common good, as corny as that sounds. And, there's been some discussion at the MCC level that kind of negative view, we were not realistic enough that we were going to face that maybe we should have taken the bomb apart rather than saying, let's bury it and move on.
I'm sad to hear this. 20 years on, it's still happening. Let's look forward. What's happening this summer in terms of motorcycles and competition? We've got a national Superbike series.
Yep, and we will continue. We're not counting on spectators. We have a model that will allow us to run a 2021 program the way we ran 2020. Obviously, for a number of reasons, we love to have spectators, not the least of which is it's just way more fun with them around. Motocross will have a season, and they are about to announce their dates. I'm not 100% sure the situation with flat track, because it is to some extent spectator attendance driven, and those sorts of events obviously are very difficult to plan. Given that even in the fall, maybe things looked a little more optimistic about having people at events than they do now, and we're talking at the start of February. So it's there's a lot of ifs and ands and buts, and obviously everybody would like to go back to the way things were, because there's more money involved, and it's a safer financial venture when the spectators are there, and also just because it's way more fun when the spectators are there. But yeah, we're going to continue, and I think that everybody understands that it's important. When we're going through all these challenges, to do your best to provide at least some of what you used to do with the aim of getting back to normal sooner rather than later. But and none of this MCC discussion is crucial to any of that, but it would probably, solving some of these problems would make things easier. And also, and this is a question that I've been asked a couple of times, will it make any difference immediately to road racing? No, because we don't have any world level tracks that are approved at the moment. But where it will make a difference is things like the Motocross to Nations and some off-road world events and trials and things like that, where we can send teams and fundraise and represent. And I think pretty much everybody involved in the sport likes to see the Canadians travel and show what we're capable of. And I think we have a pretty good reputation of punching above our weight on the world stage, and we'd like to see Canadians continue to do that. And that's the kind of thing that I'd really like to see happen just as soon as possible. And I think the FIM would like to see more structure and support in those areas too.
Yeah, so that was going to be my last question as we were wrapping things up, is that the more things change, the more things stay the same, obviously. But why was it important to you as the organizer of the National Superbike Series? Why was it important to you to have a relationship with the FIM? I think that would be the last question I would ask as we wrap up.
Well, I think we've been friendly with the FIM, and at times we speak to them directly, and we also speak to the AMA, our affiliate to the south. But officially, the view of the CMA is the Canadian Superbike Championship is an outlaw series, right? Because we are not internationally recognized. Now, we conduct ourselves in a manner that I think is appropriate. At one point, I was an FIM licensed official working for the series in the States, so I'm certainly aware of the structures, and we try and run to those standards. So it would be a little bit easier licensing, and it would be nice to take part in some of the discussions about setting rules and things like that. None of those things are essential, but it would be good not to be held at arm's length from all the other series in the world, where that we would have a voice without having to politely ask to be heard every time. That would be nice, and it may not seem essential, but of course in things like motocross, it's quite a bit different, and they could start getting much more involved on a global basis with the opportunity to have a non-CMA structure in Canada.
As I know you personally, Colin, you definitely are the poster boy of an outlaw. So sorry to hear that you will continue to be wanted across the country. Anyway, for now, that wraps up today's show. On behalf of Colin Fraser and Cameron McFadden, I'm Dave Hatch, and we invite you to join us again next week for another podcast here on the Motorcycle Experience podcast series. Bye for now.